Hi, I'm Caroline Levitt, the co-founder of Mighty Blaze, and I am so excited to have tonight the author of this book, The Plot, which is extraordinary, by Jean Hanff Korelitz, who is right here. And before I go into the introduction, I just want to say that I don't know if you can see the cover. I just noticed it that right here in the letters, it's grave behind that. This is a book that every single writer should read. It should be required reading because it really gets at the heart of everything that terrifies us. When I started reading this book in galleys, I emailed Jean immediately and said, this is freaking me out because it was so amazing. And the book is so twisty and turning. You're going to get whiplash just reading the pages. Plus, I'm not the only one who says it. We have Stephen King says insanely readable. Megan Abbott says it's from first pages, the plot ensnares you in a rich tangle of literary vanities, treachery, and fraud. It's psychologically acute and breathtakingly suspenseful. That adjective, breathtakingly, that's exactly right. Publishers Weekly gave it a starred review, said, you deserve acclaim, Jean, for your own perfect plot. Kirkus Review said it was thoroughly unsettling, which it is. I'm so obsessed by this book. And wait, there's even more. The New York Times weighed in. It's an Amazon Best Book of the Month, a May Indie Next pick. New York Times again said 15 new books to watch for. Entertainment Weekly raved about it. Oprah Magazine, Parade, LitHab, Crime Reads, Reader's Digest, Bustles. It just goes on and on and on. So Jean is also the author of other amazing novels. You Should Have Known became the wonderful, wonderful The Undoing, which starred Nicole Kidman and Hugh Grant and Donald Sutherland. Admission was also a film, which was starring Tina Fey, Lily Tomlin, Paul Rudd. She's also the author of The Devil and Webster, The White Rose, The Sabbath Day River, and A Jury of Her Peers, as well as a middle grade reader, Interference Powder, and a collection of poetry, The Properties of Breath. A new novel, The Latecomer, will be published by Celadon Books in 2022. I am just absolutely thrilled to have you here, Jean. I've loved all your books. I love what you do with Book the Writer. This book, The Plot, specifically just got to me. And I want to encourage everybody out there, you need this book. Go to bookshop.org. It'll tell you your indie bookstore where you can order it. Jean, do you have a favorite bookstore you'd like people to go to?
Well, I'm Mont Bookstore. Am I calling that, or is that happening somewhere else?
It can be anywhere. Okay, well, I'll just tell people to go to bookshop.org. Okay. So my first question for you is, the plot is incredible. The plot is about a one-time doing very well author who has fallen on hard times, and he's reduced to teaching at a kind of a mediocre school when he gets an arrogant student, Evan, who tells him that he doesn't need it to learn anything because he has the perfect plot. It's a sure thing. And this teacher, Jacob, says, yeah, and then he hears the plot and he thinks, oh my God, this is perfect. This is perfect. And he's waiting and waiting for this book to come out and see this guy become famous. And instead he learns this guy is dead. And Jacob thinks, well, he's dead, but there's still this idea. Or what if I take this idea and I get famous with it? I mean, who's to stop me? Right. Incredible story. So what I want to know is, where did this idea come from? Because as soon as you wrote this book, I thought, oh my God, this is the book that has to be written for writers. It's all our fears.
It's such a meta question, because the kind of brewing question behind the novel is, where do we get our ideas? And are they really our ideas? And as you know, as every writer knows, you know, the question we're asked more than any other question is, where do you get your ideas?
Right,
and so ubiquitous that, you know, Stephen King did us all a solid by coming up with the best answer of all time, which was Utica, New York. And the place where I wrote this book is actually not too far from Utica, New York. So every time I I'm out driving and I see a sign to Utica, I take a picture of it and I send it to all my friends and say, I'm going to Utica to get some more ideas. But in this case, that novel that you mentioned, The Latecomer, was the novel that I had been working on for several years. Very different novel from this. I've always written kind of on both sides of the thriller literary line, and I don't have much control over what kind of book I'm going to write. So I had been working on this book, The Latecomer, and it wasn't quite there. And it was in the middle of a kind of depressing conference with my editor about why she wasn't going to buy the book yet.
Oh no.
And this was not the first time we'd had this conference either. It was the second in a series of conferences on why the book wasn't ready yet. And in the middle of this conference, which was a year ago in January, I said to her, I also have this other idea. And one of the reasons I would like to be finished with The Latecomers, because I kind of want to get going on this thing. I have a sense that it's good. It's a good idea. And I just told her the story, and I didn't really know the story yet. I mean, it was a new idea. I hadn't thought a lot of it out, partly because it was new and partly because I don't think we should think it out too much.
Right.
And as I told her about these characters and what they do, I could see her getting, more and more excited, which was very gratifying. And we agreed that I would put aside the Latecomer, which I clearly, needed some distance from. And I would write this new one instead. And it really just wanted to be written. And then there was a pandemic, and I was alone in a very remote place. Well, alone with my husband in a very remote place. He was writing as well. And it really was kind of a perfect storm. Because I was very, very unhappy during these months. I was very scared. I was very sad. I was very angry. And it was just a kind of a perfect conjunction of emotion and reality and idea and this idea. So this novel got written inside of 4 months, which sound really bad.
That's incredible.
I don't think it is bad. I think it's pretty good, actually. I'm pretty happy with this book.
When you said you hit the right words, that you were scared, you felt terrified. Of course, it was about the pandemic, but those are also the feelings that play into the book with Jacob. He's scared. He's like working at a crappy college, and he's teaching students that aren't very good. And he feels like he was famous once, and now it's gone. And
he doesn't feel so much that he was famous. I think he feels that he failed to make it.
He failed. He's a failure.
With even his best chance, when he was a new and noteworthy, a kind of bright young thing, even then he didn't make more than a ripple. And now he's not young, and he's out of steam, out of gas, out of ideas. And this real classic arrogant jerk, and I know you've done teaching, right? You've taught creative writing. So this guy. He's probably in every one of your classes.
Yeah, right? Of course. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. They are in every single class. But the interesting thing to me too is that you made so many really interesting choices. Like, I kept thinking that, when Jacob steals the story, he doesn't steal it immediately. He waits until this guy is dead. So there's a part of us reading it where we think, what kind of moral ground are we on? I mean, this guy had this idea, but he's dead. Is it wrong for him to take this idea and run with it and put his own stamp on it? And it's sometimes as I was reading, I thought, he's making, people pick up other people's ideas all the time and make it their own.
We do the time. It's the kind of thing that we writers obsess about. And I'm not sure how much other people do, but they need to know that the Disney movie that they're watching, the novel they're reading, everything is like a daisy chain of ideas, stories that goes back to the cavemen. And that is beautiful. I mean, I think that's a beautiful thing. I love that the Odyssey became Ulysses, became Mountain. I mean, these are the things that get me going. This is something I love. And yet you find this dismissive tone among readers. Oh, she stole that from so-and-so, and that's a ripoff of so-and-so. That's a way to look at it, but it's not the way I like to look at it.
Right. It's not the real way to look at it, because it's everybody has their own unique story and their own unique take. But I mean, look at like Great Gatsby just went back into the public domain, and there's like 4 books about different characters of Gatsby. Is that a bad thing? I don't think it is.
I don't think it is. I mean, the only time I got annoyed about it was, I think I got annoyed at the idea of Longbourn, the novel Longbourn, because I have such reverence for Pride and Prejudice. But then I read Longbourn and it was so fantastic. And P.D. James, took the characters from Pride and Prejudice and put them in a mystery novel, and that was fantastic. So I think I even let go of those exceptions to the rule.
Yeah. So, I mean, that was what I thought was so incredibly interesting. And even afterwards, when I don't want to give away too much the plot, which is extraordinary, you never see anything coming, but he does run with this idea and he's writing it, and he does become totally famous. And then he gets a message that says, you stole this. But then it's the question of, what do you steal?
Yeah.
I mean, what does that mean to steal an idea or steal a story? I mean, I always, you always sort of wonder, but when you're writing, it becomes yours. I mean, you could give one plot to 5 very different writers, and they'd have 5 different stories.
I know.
Plot, right?
Isn't it wonderful? I was talking about this with my friend Christina Baker Klein, and she said that in a writing program that she was teaching in, they assigned the students the wedding cake in the road. That was the image. And everybody wrote a completely different story.
Yeah.
So that's what we're here to do. We're here to write our story. So.
And also, there's the whole question of what inspires us. I'm sure that you've read books where you felt inspired and it started your thinking going down a path. I mean, I guess my particular feeling is, unless you are lifting up the actual writing, word for word, or then I don't believe it's theft.
Yeah, that's because you're an artist. But let's also be clear: if you lift language, you should be boiled in oil. I mean, this is terrible. Plagiarism.
Right. That's bad.
Against us. The question is, where's the line? If I take your novel and I repurpose all the characters and I put them in a different part of the country and I tell the story, except they're all wearing cowboy boots instead of on Cape Cod. What do I owe you? It's morally wrong. But
it's interesting. It's fascinating. And writers think about that all the time. I have a lot of students who will call me and say, oh my God, I finished my novel and I just read that there's another novel coming out, and it's also about, the same basic thing. And I always told them, you don't know that it is.
Yeah.
It's a different book. You need to read the other book and see like what it's about. And I love that Evan keeps saying, he's this arrogant writer, and he keeps saying, my plot is can't miss. I don't have to learn anything. I don't even have to write it. It's going to be big. And when Jacob reads this, he agrees too. So I wanted to know, as the writer, how did you know it was a can't miss plot? When you write, do you have a feeling that your plots are like can't miss, or do you
I would never be that arrogant. I would never be that arrogant. And by the way, I don't know that this plot doesn't exist, but I do know, or I should clarify, I do not know that the thing which makes Evan's plot so distinctive and is so stunning to Jake when he hears it does not exist in a novel. But I do know that I have read about 3,000 novels, according to Goodreads, and I have never encountered this thing. Does that mean it's not out there? No, it could be out there. If you've read this somewhere else, I'll be very unhappy, but I'll be very interested. So that to me was a pretty good indication. If I've spent my life reading novels, and I haven't come across this, I'm going to go with pretty good. That's pretty good.
Okay.
But it can't just be a situation or a turn of events. It has to feel real. It has to be compelling. So, I mean, he does take this thing and make it into a novel that is filling theaters of readers. And every time I said to myself, come on, how many great novelists go around the country, they've got 20 people in the audience and they feel happy about that, 20 people in the audience. And then I remember Gone Girl. Gone Girl would have filled stadiums around the country. And I've been in theaters where, David Sedaris walks in and we all get to our feet and start clapping. So it's not unheard of to have that kind of success for a literary writer. But as you know, as well as I do, it's very rare.
Evan keeps talking about that this is a story that needs to be told. Do you ever feel that there are stories that you're toying with that you don't want to tell, that you prefer not to even touch?
I'm not a writer who is coming down with stories all the time. I mean, I have a few. I think they cook in me for a long time. Usually this was an exception to that, but I don't have 10 stories, assailing me at all times. So I'm more of a serial monogamist when it comes to writing. So I wish I did have, all of those stories begging me to write them, but I don't. But this showed up like a ton of bricks. I mean,
It's incredible. It's such an incredible book. So speaking of success, Jacob's and what would have been Evan's success, let's talk about your success, because your success is extraordinary. So I wanted to know, what does it feel like for you? Did you think that Faye was going to be something different than it is, or do you not even think about it? What did it used to mean to you, and what does it mean now, besides the fact that you can keep on writing?
Well, I'm about to have a pretty significant birthday, and I've been writing for 40 years, 35 to 40 years, seriously. And I think the fact that almost nobody had ever heard of me until Nicole Kidman hit the screen last fall is a pretty succinct way to answer that question. I mean, to me, the greatest thing would be to walk into a bookstore and see my book there. And for me, that was not the case for a long time. I mean, I've been so lucky. I've had, an editor who really supported me, who kept buying my work, even though I was not making any money for them. But it's very sweet, and I completely appreciate it, because for most of my career, success. I mean, I was a mid-list author, so that's clear to me that that's what I was. I was doing well enough that they managed to look past my terrible sales figures. But I was nobody's idea of a successful author, but maybe my mom's, but so, yeah, for me, the writing about failure is extremely close, as it is, I think, to most of us, no matter where we are in our careers, because, great first novel and everybody knows your name and everybody reads your book, but they don't buy your second novel and they don't buy your third novel. And
that happens.
And it happens a lot. And suddenly those writers who you were so kind of envious of at the time of their magnificent first novels are really struggling. They know what failure feels like. And if you never had that first enormous success, you know it too. So,
right. But do you worry about it now, or do you feel like now there's no way to go but up? I sort of know the answer to this question, but I want to ask you anyway.
I mean, I feel grateful that I got here, that I got to 7 novels. I feel proud that I wrote 7 novels. it's really all positive at this point. And if this book finds the kind of readership that that previous books of mine did not find, I will be even happier, because the great thing about books is they don't go anywhere.
Right, right.
If you suddenly, well, who is this Jean Hanff Korelitz person? Oh, I like this book. Well, guess what? There are 6 more novels for you to find. You can find them on, in sale bins at the church rummage sale. That doesn't matter to me. Go and enjoy them. They're exactly the same as the day they were published.
That's great. I want to talk about your process, because the thing that got me so much in this book, let me just show the gorgeous cover again, is that there was nothing. I feel like, well, I've read so much and I write, so I usually know where books are coming. I never knew what was going to happen next in this book. It was one surprise after another. Jake publishes and becomes famous, but then he gets that note that says he's a thief, and it threatens everything that he's built, his fame, a woman he loves, everything else. It was all done so seamlessly that by the time we got to the end was like a hot fudge sundae with whipped cream and everything on it and no calories. You just felt, oh my God. And it immediately made me go back and read the book again, almost like the Sixth Sense. Yeah. I wanted to see how you did it, and I still couldn't really figure it out. So I wanted to ask you, did you map this out before you started to write? You didn't. So how did you know it was going to happen? Did it just
you know this too. You know roughly where you're going. You know you're going from A to Z. But you don't know every stop along the way. That's where discovery comes in. So did I know what the plot was? Yes. Did I know how it made its way to Jake? Yes. I knew these big things, but I didn't know everything that he would find out along the way. And, you just ask yourself, with everything that you're about to reveal, do I need to reveal this?
Right.
What's the least I can reveal? If I mislead, do I destroy my own credibility as a narrative voice? And sometimes you figure that out by doing it wrong. There was a point in the middle of writing the book last winter that I had to basically unravel about, 60 pages and take another run at it, because things were happening in the wrong order. And so you don't always know what the steps are going to be. You have to kind of beat your way through. But then, I love that you went back and then read it again to see.
Oh yeah, I did.
I didn't slip up at all anywhere.
No, it was amazing. It was just as much fun the second time. There was the same kind of frisson of excitement, saying like, oh my God, here this comes again. I want to tell everybody out there listening, if you have any questions for Jane, please ask, and we will ask them in probably 5 minutes. I wanted to ask you about the movies. Let's talk about the movie of The Undoing. Did you learn anything about writing from the way they changed the book to the movie?
Did I learn anything about writing? Well, I always knew that writing a novel and writing for screen are, completely different skill sets. I was fortunate in that I'd had the earlier experience with Admission, and that was a very positive experience. I became good friends with the screenwriter, Karen Kroner. I'm still in touch with her. But the first time I read that script was devastating because of all the changes that were made. Now, I go to the movies. I understand that in the story of a Princeton admissions officer looking at Tina Fey reading a folder at her desk is not cinematically exciting. I realize that my novels are so much in people's heads that, they need help. They need a different kind of storytelling. So that was a lesson that I learned back in 2012. And when David E. Kelley got involved with You Should Have Known to make The Undoing, he's a master. So to me, I just thought, I'm just going to learn everything that I can from him. And he had told me up front, this It's going to be a different story. It's going to be more of a whodunit. The character of Jonathan, who was played by Hugh Grant, is barely in the book. He's barely in the book.
Yeah.
Because I'm not that interested. I mean, I'm interested in him as a sociopath, but I'm not interested in him as a character. I'm interested in her, in the Grace character. And the book was about her. And it was about her devastation, but it was also about how she rebuilds her life. So it's a very different take on the material. I think David was primarily interested in the characters and in the situation. And from that, he wove a very entertaining and thrilling and twisty thing, which I enjoyed completely. And by the way, I didn't know who did it until everybody else found out. So
that's great. That's
yeah,
great.
I thought it was somebody else. So what do I know?
Wow. So can you tell me, has your writing life changed since the pandemic? I mean, what was it like during the pandemic? And now that we're coming out of the pandemic a little bit, do you feel like your writing is different?
Well, the pandemic was, as I said before, just wonderfully focusing because I was so grateful that I had work. I was grateful that I had work that was going to have an income. I was grateful for a lot. I was grateful mainly that I was safe. I felt, I mean, I didn't see anybody, so I felt safe that way. But I have big gaps between my books usually. So whatever I might have, whatever impact the pandemic might have had on the writing of this novel probably will not carry over to what I do next. I mean, I like to write in bed. Sometimes I go to the coffee shop. I have a very nice desk that I never, ever sit at. I mean, to me, everything is just set dressing except for the words that get onto the page. That's the only thing that matters. And
do you talk about your work with other people?
Do I work with other people?
Show your work to other people before you send it to your editor?
My best friend from college is a writer who lives in California, and she sees everything, and she is great. She has such an eye for detail. And then it goes to my agent, Suzanne Gluck, and she also is great. And then it goes to my editor, Deb Futter, and those are my three angels. So, yeah.
So, you're really giving back to the community with Book the Writer, and I'd love it if you talk about that.
Oh, nothing would make me happier. Well, many years ago, I lived in New Jersey, and I started a book club called the Meet the Author Book Club, and the author was always there. And I was amazed at how many writers came down from New York. I didn't pay them. I said, but I'll pay for your New Jersey transit ticket and we'll sell 25 copies. And, again, to many of us, that's a big deal.
Yeah, it is a big deal.
We're not all David Sedaris. We're not all Gillian Flynn. So a lot of people came down to Princeton and spent the evening with us. And I think they enjoyed it. And the members of the book club just absolutely loved it. And then I moved back to New York, the city of my birth, and I thought maybe this can be a business. So I started Book the Writer, and the first iteration of it, which you were a part of, was not successful because what I was trying to do back then was send authors to existing book clubs.
Right.
People in groups don't often agree with one another. And what I was hearing a lot of was, well, I would love to, but the rest of my group can't agree to do it. So I sort of flipped the concept, and now I hold the book group. We usually meet in living rooms in Manhattan, but we've been online since last fall. And people just sign up, they pay a registration fee, they buy the book, and then we have these small conversations with the author about the book. We are hoping to go back to in-person meetings in the fall. We have an amazing fall list already, just like superstars. But we're going to try to maintain some kind of an online element because it's been fantastic to have people joining us from all over the world.
Right. So. Absolutely. Do we have any questions yet for Jean that we can cover? Oh, yes. Great. Do you and your husband, poet Paul Muldoon, share your work with each other? How does that work?
I'm sitting at I've got my books over here, and this is the most important book we shared with each other. This is an adaptation of James Joyce's The Dead that we wrote together. And when I say together, I mean I was in this room and he was in the other room. Like together together. But this is an immersive adaptation of The Dead that my sister and I produced for Irish Repertory Theater in New York, and we ran it for 3 holiday seasons, and it was so much fun. The audience was walking around this 19th century mansion.
Wow.
With the actors, everybody was drinking whiskey. We all sat down and had the famous feast together. And then at the end of the night, we followed Greta and Gabriel Conroy into their bedroom upstairs and watched them have this scene, this famous, one of the most famous scenes in literature, actually. And it was just magical. And we would love to do it again. We couldn't do it during the pandemic, obviously, but we had also lost our venue before that. So we're looking to come back. We would love to do it again. It's great. But anyway, have we collaborated other times? Never.
Okay. Was there anything you found to be difficult or challenging in seeing your stories move to the big screen?
Difficult or challenging? I think, like I said, I think I worked out all of the kinks with the first one. And by the time You Should Have Known came, I was like, this is the book, that's the TV show. So it wasn't that bad. I was introduced to people on the set as the author of the book, and most of them said, "Oh, there's a book." So
no, really?
you're just not part of that world. They're not like us, they're visual people. They're not so much about words, and that's fine.
Wow. At what point during your process do you fully understand the ending? Oh, that's a good question. I'd like to know that.
Does that refer to this particular novel or
this particular novel for the plot?
I knew what the ending was. The question, the meta question of this novel is basically, whose story is it?
Right.
What constitutes authorship? And by the end of the novel, the story is in the hands of the person who has the greatest claim to it. And that feels right, although many other things feel very wrong. So I understood that that's where we were heading. I wasn't always sure how to get there.
That's so surprising. So surprising. So can you talk about The Leftovers? Are you going back to that, or
The Latecomer. The
Latecomer. Sorry.
Are you going back to that? I love The Leftovers, and I love Tom Perrotta. I think he's such a magnificent writer. And my son was an extra in The Latecomers, in the Leftovers.
So great.
With the Leftovers has a very special place in my heart, but I didn't write it. So the Latecomer, I'm back at work on now, and it's all there. It just needs another twist of the kaleidoscope for things to just work better, and I'll get there. I have a deadline this summer, and hopefully it will be published next spring. But it's a very, very different book from
how so?
Well, I mean, well, actually, that's not true. People do die, but it's not written as a suspense novel. It's I think of it as my John Irving novel, or a kind of a Meg Wolitzer novel. It's about a family in which it's about their wanderings from one another and their return to one another. It's a quieter book. I love the way things come together at the end, but not like this. So, I mean, as I said, I love thrillers. I love literary fiction. I've written all over the map in terms of genre, and I think that's been a big part of the problem as far as people understanding me, or kind of publishers understanding where to put me, readers where to find me if they were looking for me, which in general they were not. So I can't, like I said, I can't really help it. I can't dedicate myself to a kind of novel because
Right.
I'm always about whatever the thing is that I'm writing, and it tells me what it is. So very early in my career, my first novel was a legal thriller, and my publisher at the time said, "Okay, now we want you to write a sequel." And I said, "No, that's not the book that I'm writing now." And they said, "Okay, bye bye." And it basically it's that was the only time that happened. But it's I've just zigzagged all over the place because that's just where my
Yeah, you can't write what you don't feel like you can write. It's early in my career. I had a publisher who wanted me to write a really commercial novel. It was the worst book I ever wrote because my heart wasn't in it. And that book got exactly 2 reviews, and they were both horrific. And it's funny because when I reread those reviews a few years ago, and then I went back and looked at the book, I realized those reviews were right. They were probably even a little kind.
yeah.
I wanted to ask you because I loved so much the scenes of the writing class and the writers in there and the teacher. Did you take writing classes yourself? Did you study writing?
No, I think I had one creative writing class at Dartmouth when I was an undergraduate, and I I learned something really important in that class. Maybe it's the only thing you can learn in a writing class, and that was maybe not. And that was I had a short story, and I don't write short stories, but I was a student, so I was writing a short story. And my teacher pointed to this one character and said, "What is this character doing there? He doesn't do anything. He just like sits there." And I said, "Yeah, but he was there
Yeah,
in real life." And she said, "I don't care. I don't care if he was there in real life. This isn't real life. This is
right,
fiction." And it's like this light went on. Like, oh, it doesn't matter what happened in real life. I can
right.
pick it all up. And it was so liberating, and that was a really important thing to learn, but that is the last fiction writing class I ever took.
That's how, because you got it so perfectly. I mean,
Well, but
reading those
remember,
scenes was like,
a
oh,
lot of writers, and I've been around writing programs, and I'm married to somebody who teaches creative writing, although not at that, well, occasionally at that level. um, but what, it's not that hard to make fun of writers, to satirize. And also I did work in publishing, so I mean, yeah, it wasn't hard.
okay.
Remember, there's a guy in the creative writing class who's rewriting Les Miserables to correct all of Victor Hugo's mistakes. That was a person I encountered.
It's hilarious.
Just want to go, really? Yeah, really.
It's well, I also wanted to ask you, are you considering writing the script for the plot? Because it's so visual, and so usually books about writers are not that interesting. I mean, movies about writers are not that interesting because who
I
wants to see the writer just sitting there? But this book is just fast, 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 fast.
Well, I am hoping to be part of a group of writers who
Good.
take it to a different medium, which will be a
Right.
wonderful experience for me because it's something I've always wanted to try, and I think I will bring certain insights to this story. But I can't say any more about that.
Okay. Okay. And the question I always ask writers is, what's obsessing you now and why?
Oh my God.
Sorry.
What's obsessing me now and what? Well, I guess my imminent birthday into a whole new decade is kind of obsessing me right. There are times when I absolutely cannot watch the news or read the
Right.
paper. I
Me
get
neither.
blackouts because I am so furious that I'm vibrating with rage at
Yeah.
all times. It's not a good way to live. 6 months ago, more than 6 months ago, a year ago, 9 months ago, all I wanted in the world was a vaccine and a new president. And I am the luckiest person in the world because I have both. And we've made it through this. We haven't lost anyone. And I am just, I guess what's obsessing me now, it sounds so cheesy, but gratitude. I'm not a really grateful person, but I am so grateful right now. I'm grateful for the science. I'm grateful for the people who knocked themselves out during this time. I'm grateful for people like you who stepped up and did things like this that kept the rest of us from losing our minds. You know, there's a lot to be thankful.
There's a lot to be grateful for. Are there any last questions? Okay, I want to remind everybody, you need this book. I'm telling you, I haven't been this affected by a book in such a long time. I literally finished it and started reading it again because it was that good.
Wow.
No, seriously, it's multi-layered. It's for if you're a writer, you want to read it. If you're a reader, you want to read it. It's just an astonishing book. It has so many layers. It's so smart, so literary, and yet also so suspenseful. Bookshop.org will tell you like where your indie bookstore is. And after you read it, if you want to talk about it, go contact me because I love to talk about this book. Thank you so much, everybody, for being here. Thank you so much, Jean.
Welcome. And I know this got distorted early in our talk with some thing that went wonky with the sound, but one of my favorite bookstores is the Vermont Bookstore in Middlebury. Somebody who worked there who gave me just a beautiful review that I really appreciate. But I used to go there all the time in the summers when we were up at Breadloaf. So Vermont Bookstore, thank you so much. You're an awesome bookstore, and I love you.
Thank you, everybody.